The third is the problems with what, let's call them, transnational sort of institutions. And the Greeks had these, the various federations of city-states that were created for various purposes. You see them referenced all the time, for example, in the Federalist Papers, when they're trying to think, well, how can our states sort of create one sort of unified central power? And they're always looking back to the various city-state leagues in ancient Greece. Well, the problem with them is that, as the record of Greek history shows, is that states will want to use those for their own advantage. They will create them with some pretext of some lofty goal, but they end up being instruments of a state's power. They become manipulated. They are manipulated by the states to achieve their own aims. Of course, the most famous example, probably comes to your mind, is the way the Mutual Defense League that the Athenians created after the Persian invasion, what we call the Delian League, that is, we're all going to contribute ships or money so that we can patrol the Aegean to make sure the Persians don't, try to invade us again, evolved into the Athenian Empire. That's what the Athenian ambassador was talking about. Says, oh, well, it happened and we're going to keep it. Right? Well, this was one of Philip's great techniques, was the use of these various sorts of mutual defense leagues. And the reason is that they gave him a legitimate pretext for involving himself in the business of the southern Greek city-states. He could pass himself off as not as an aggressor, right, but as a good Greek trying to achieve some aim that this league was put together to achieve. Unfortunately, I don't have time to go into all of the particulars, but there was a war that broke out in 356 that's called the Third Sacred War, and it involved what we call the Amphictyonic League. This was a group of city-states in central Greece who had the responsibility for the very important shrine of Apollo at Delphi. And it was also a league that could declare war on somebody who had violated at some level of the temple or the god. So it was very important, because it wasn't just, getting together to manage the site, the temple, the oracle. It could turn into a military alliance. Well, now you can see how useful that is for Philip. Now this war broke out because one of the states' focus, I can't go into the details of the whole debate, but basically the leagues wanted to fine Phocas, and Phocas decided they didn't want to pay the fine, and instead they seized the temple and started using all of the wealth to buy mercenaries, and it started a war that went on for almost 10 years. Also, they were giving jewelry to their girlfriends and wives, and it got to be this big sort of scandal. Well, Philip exploited this brilliantly. Through his influence in Thessaly, just to the north, he had a position in the Amphictyonic League where he could pass himself off as a defender of the league and as a defender of the god, as the savior of the god. When he went into the climatic battle against the Phocians, he had his men all put garlands of laurel, which of course is the crown sacred to Apollo, so he could pass himself off as the defender of the god. But of course, one of the important details about that part of Greece is the pass of Thermopylae. See, if he's going to move down into southern Greece, if he has control of Thermopylae, it's going to be a lot easier. So now he has a legitimate presence in central Greece near Thermopylae, which of course is necessary before he moves farther south into Boeotia, the great state of Thebes, and then of course into Attica. But he's managed to do that, to mask his aggression by passing himself off as the savior of the god. And Justin describes this. This affair, he's talking about Philip's participation in the Sacred War, brought incredibly great glory to Philip in the opinion of all people, who called him the avenger of the god, and the defender of religion. Brilliant, isn't it? The defender of the god and the defender of religion. No, he was pursuing his own interests and aims, but he could manipulate this interstate organization in order to achieve that. Now, we could duplicate more and more examples of how Philip does this when he and Athens make peace, so-called Peace of Philocrates in 346. One of the terms that they haggled over was each side should keep what it has, or each side should keep what is its own. In other words, each side can keep whatever it has conquered or taken control of, but the Athenians want to say, no, each side can only keep what is legitimately theirs, because there were a lot of places. There was Amphipolis, for example, the city in the north important to Athens that was under the control of Philip. And so if each side gets what's their own, then the Athenians get Amphipolis back. Well, Philip's not going to do that. So while the Athenians in the assembly are haggling over the terms and making speeches, etc., then they have to pass a decree, then they have to send the ambassadors. Well, they have a hard time finding Philip. Philip's off in the north, in Thrace, making conquests. He hasn't signed yet, you see. So the more that he conquers or gets control of, the more that's going to be what he has when they sign the treaty. And he brilliantly exploits this process. Putting off the Athenian ambassadors, they have a hard time finding them, charming them. That's another dimension of Philip's skill. Apparently he was a very charming man. And the end result is, of course, by 338, when finally, the Athenians rouse themselves not to just keep sending half-baked forces of mercenaries, but citizen infantrymen with money. They set aside their ancient enmity with Thebes and align with Thebes, and they meet at Chaeronea, and they lose. It's too late. All the groundwork for the military conquest has been laid in the previous 21 years. So, what would this lesson be? I think Thomas Hobbes, who is the great translator of Thucydides, of course, says it best. And he says, covenants without the sword are but words, and of no strength to secure a man at all. Without a credible threat of force, without a credible belief on the part of the adversary that force will be used, I don't mean sending cruise missiles into empty caves in Afghanistan, right? Real force, all diplomatic discussion, meetings, commissions, etc., are not going to achieve their aim. And let me finish by using, again, the obvious example right now because it's all in the news of Iran and its attempts to get a nuclear weapon. Because now the administration said, we're going to talk to Iran. Just last week it said, we no longer have the precondition that you stop processing uranium. All right? And we're going to sit down and we're going to negotiate and figure out how can we resolve this. Well, if you think about it from a sort of Thucydidean point of view, it is simply not in Iran's interest not to have nuclear capability. All it has to do is look at North Korea. If not for the bomb, if not for nuclear weapons, we would not be talking about North Korea any more than we talk about Cuba, right? And we only talk about Cuba because it's 70 miles away. North Korea, it's a failed state utterly and completely. Pakistan. Why does Pakistan dominate so much of our foreign policy thinking? One reason, they have a bomb. Iran gets a bomb, it changes the whole equation, and it knows that.